What a moment.
Baker leans in. There's the snap. Blitz comes. Mayfield back.
DB.
Goes, picked up by the Lions. Intercepted by the Lions. Intercepted by the Lions. Derek Barnes. Derek Barnes. Derek Barnes.
Shout out Dan Miller.
The Lions are going to
Big
San
shout out Dan Miller.
Francisco.
What a
Oh,
moment.
Baby, stand up, Ford Field. Look at this. Look at this.
Welcome back, sports fans. Thank you for coming back for another video. I am your host, Johnny Gaz. Thank you for returning yet again. We are on the road to 500 subscribers. It has been an amazing ride. If you have not already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notify bell so you don't miss any future videos here on Johnny Gaz Sports. And if you dig the vibe and what we're doing here today, make sure to slap that like button. It is the biggest free way to help me out today. I so much appreciate your time. Let's get into today's topic. The latest video we did on the channel was a heavy focus on the Lions offense and answered the question if the Lions could be the best offense in 2024. Now let's leave that side of the football and jump over to the defensive side of the football for the Detroit Lions. Historically, and over the last 2-3 seasons, the problem with the Lions in general has been their defense. They have not been able to get sustained pressure on the quarterback that leads to sacks to help out the rest of the defense. Because they have not been able to sustain that pressure, it causes problems in their back end, issues at cornerback, issues covering high-end wide receivers. We saw towards the end of the season, the Lions were not able to cover wide receivers that had skill. You know, whether that be Minnesota, Dallas, San Francisco, Tampa Bay, St. Louis, they were giving up historically good numbers through the air. And I think that all leads back to the front end. Now in 2024, we have Aaron Glenn returning as a defensive coordinator, and a lot of good things have happened now to lead us in the right direction. So today we're going to answer the question, can the Lions defense win them a Super Bowl? The saying in sports was always, defense wins championships. Well, we just got off a video talking about the elite status of the Detroit Lions offense. Will that be enough to carry them to a Super Bowl? I don't think so. I challenge you to find me a team that won the Super Bowl that had a bad defense. Now, the last several seasons, there have been many points in those seasons where the Lions were a bad defense, and I don't think they had enough there to ultimately win them a Super Bowl. Now, they got extremely close last season, and with a few different decisions and a few other plays made, we might be talking differently than we are right now. But the truth is, we know where the Lions struggle on defense, up front and in the secondary. If they can make the necessary changes, and we're going to talk about some of the moves they've already made, I think they're putting themselves in a very good position. Today's video is going to discuss that in detail. We're going to review the current depth chart of the Detroit Lions as they head towards the NFL draft. We're going to review some of the key stats, and we're going to spotlight a few of the more important players, in my opinion, as they head into the 2024 season. Let's get into it. A few news updates before we get into the meat of this video. I think one of the biggest pieces of news we got this week was that Josh Reynolds, wide receiver, has signed with the Denver Broncos a 2-year contract worth up to $14 million. We spent time in previous videos talking about if Josh Reynolds came back or if Josh Reynolds was to leave the organization. The previous video we just did highlighted the importance of Jameson Williams taking the next step. And although they'll have to make some sort of move to fill the wide receiver room, I don't think that leaves a hole for them at that position. There were also some rule changes that we just talked about. The drop hip tackle has been outlawed in the NFL. You'll see now penalties being called for that sort of tackle. Obviously, this is in an effort to protect players' safety and health, and that certainly has led to a lot of hip, knee, and ankle injuries. So, in essence, I do like that they're trying to make sure that the player's safety is number one, but it's just another thing that ultimately is taking away from the aggressiveness, the tackling style of football. A few other news and notes from the NFL owners meeting. There were several press conferences held. Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, and the organization came out and made several statements, some in relation to Cam Sutton in that story. Ultimately, I think the organization is moving on and forward without him. I think there's differing opinions on if they should make a move at cornerback, bring somebody else in, address it in the draft. So that was sort of brought up in those meetings. Brad Holmes talked about the fact that they were able to bring in all of their A-grade free agents, ultimately meaning that they got the guys that they sought out to get in free agency. We've done several videos that have covered all of the acquisitions, and we'll talk about and touch on those here in detail again. They also touched on the Carlton Davis contract. We know that they did restructure his contract from $14 million, I believe, down to $8 million, transitioning the other money into signing bonus and then pushing that out into further years of dead cap money and voided cap money. So some good moves there in relation to Carlton Davis. They talked about Brian Branch playing a little bit more of a significant role in the defense. Now, I think he was already there, but ultimately with the departure of Cam Sutton and a need at cornerback, they're really going to need him to step up, and I think they're going to use him in a multitude of ways there on the defense. We'll talk about him a little bit more in a minute. The other news and notes I want to mention here is that the Lions uniform reveal has now officially been set for April 18th. There's been not a lot of teasers. There's been nothing leaked that I've seen so far. I think the only thing that you've seen is the draft caps, which all of them kind of look the same. So people were kind of diving into the color scheme there. There was some hints there out of those NFL owners meetings, conferences, that you're going to see maybe potentially some black introduced, some different pants options. I mean, there's just a lot of up and down with this. I'm not really sure what to think at this point just because there hasn't been anything leaked, but I'm excited for that April 18th date just before the draft. And as we've seen here, let me take myself off the screen. We'll get myself my mug here off the screen for a moment. You'll see a very brief breakdown of the new NFL kickoff for 2024. Now, I will not go through every single detail here with you now. You can find all of the details all over social media. Any sports network website will have this for you. And in the description of this video, I will post a link to the NFL.com description of the rule changes if you'd like it word for word. Ultimately, they're, again, trying to protect the players. Kickoff returns were at a historic low in 2023, so they're trying to make an effort to bring the kickoff back. In doing so, I think this is a good way to try it. I don't know if this is the ultimate solution. This is just a trial period for the NFL. They do it very successfully in the XFL. And it did increase the amount of kickoff returns that you get coming out of something like this. It didn't necessarily increase, let's say a kickoff return touchdown percentage, but you're definitely going to get more schemes and returns. And it also, I think, changes the back end of your roster. If this becomes a more prominent play that you have to focus on, then those last few roster spots that you have, typically for special team specialists, is going to become even more important if this play plays a much more major part in the NFL's future. All right, now let's dive into the depth chart currently on the defense for the Detroit Lions as we get a little bit closer to the draft. We'll touch on a couple of the free agent signings that they had as well as the trade as well. So let's start at the top. We know, maybe the cog that runs the defensive wheel for the Detroit Lions is Aiden Hutchinson. He is a superstar. He will be the reason why this defense either succeeds or fails in 2024, along with a few other reasons, but you need him more than anything. He is the most valuable piece to this defense, and he will prove so, I believe, again in 2024. On the other defensive end, we know the Lions made a free agent acquisition for Marcus Davenport from the Minnesota Vikings. Again, there's previous videos here that go over the details of that deal and the contract. But ultimately, the Lions are hoping to get Marcus Davenport sort of on a prove-it deal coming off in an injury-laden season he had with the Vikings. The Lions organization is familiar with him, with his time with the Saints prior to that when Dan Campbell was there. So I think that they believe they got a steal based on the number if they can get the production out of Marcus Davenport if he remains healthy. Behind those gentlemen at defensive end, you have guys like John Kaminsky. You have Josh Pascal, who you're hoping takes another step up coming off of his first two seasons. He was injured in 2022 and gave you very little production in 2023. The Lions also went out and signed Canadian Football League star Matthew Betts. I think will be more of a project. I think it'll take some time for him to kind of find his way in the NFL game, but I think there's a lot of upside. I think he led the Canadian Football League in sacks, if I'm not misspeaking there. Now at the defensive tackle position, the Lions already have an established star in Aleem McNeil. However, last year, they really didn't have a running mate for him or someone to back him up when he couldn't play every down. So the Lions have gone out and signed defensive tackle DJ Reader. Again, look in the archives for Johnny Gaz Sports so you can find the information on his contract and the deal there. But pairing DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil up in the middle, sandwiched between hopefully is Aiden Hutchinson and Marcus Davenport, you have now, I think, put yourself in a position where you have upgraded your defensive line tenfold from last year. Behind those guys at defensive tackle, we've talked about Levi Onwuzurike. Can he take a step up next season? A guy like Broderick Martin in his second year, can he also take a step up? So you have young guys behind what will hopefully be these established players, assuming they all remain healthy, to hopefully bolster that defensive line. Do they still maybe need to make a move in the draft? I believe that to be the case. And again, we talked about in previous videos maybe the importance of finding one more piece on that defensive line. Linebackers. I think the heart of your linebacking crew here for the Detroit Lions is Alex Anzalone. And he's gotten, I think, better and better with his time here in Detroit. I think that, he may not be the size guy, the speed, the ultimate athlete that you're looking for, but he is a field general. I think the players on that team respect him. I think he's earned respect from guys in the league. The coaches clearly trust him, and he's ultimately going to be the guy that sort of brings Jack Campbell, who's on the other side of him as the weak side linebacker, kind of along with him and groom him into his wings so that eventually Jack Campbell, the rookie out of Iowa that they drafted last year, will then transition into the middle linebacker role. But for 2024, we have a lot of faith and trust in Alex Anzalone in the middle. You'll then have Jack Campbell on the weak side, and we know Derek Barnes on the strong side, who we know opened up with that play before they got to the NFC Championship game. Now, Derek Barnes in the past has sort of struggled and been very up and down, so they've had to rely on other guys. As you see here, Jalen Reeves-Maybin, who they re-signed heading into next year, and then Malcolm Rodriguez, who had a fantastic rookie season. But I think the fact is they needed more guys at the linebacking crew, and they ended up getting those guys, such as Jack Campbell, which then pushes Malcolm Rodriguez back in the depth chart. And that's sort of what you like to see, and they're starting to now build depth at linebacker. We've also focused very heavily on the Lions' defensive backfield. Again, several videos here in the archives discussing not only the current state of affairs, ultimately the Cameron Sutton situation, but we know at cornerback we now have Carlton Davis III, who the Lions acquired in a trade from Tampa Bay. They restructured his contract, and they're hoping that he will be their cornerback one. On the other side, they re-signed Emmanuel Moseley, coming off of 2 ACL injuries now. So again, they're trying to be very hopeful that he will return healthy and give them what they need as a cornerback number 2. They also ended up bringing in free agent Amik Robertson from the Las Vegas Raiders. He's more of a nickel slot corner, a little bit less in size, but really started to prove himself towards the end of the season. And if Emmanuel Moseley doesn't pan out, I think Amik Robertson then sort of moves into that spot. We talked about Brian Branch briefly, but we'll mention him again. Ultimately, he is listed as a second cornerback, but he is really used as that jack of all trades in the defensive backfield, sort of as a strong safety a lot last year, and I think you'll see him in that role again this year. There's been a lot of talk coming out of the Lions organization of giving him an increased role, and I think with the departure of Cam Sutton, that's even going to be more true now as we move forward. Now at safety, we know they have Kirby Joseph. We talked about in a previous video Ife Melifonwu and his sort of comeuppance last year towards the end of the year. And I think they're expecting a lot out of him here in 2024. So I expect to see Kirby Joseph and Ife Melifonwu as your safeties. And then Carlton Davis, Emmanuel Moseley, Brian Branch, Amik Robertson, and then all of the guys you see behind them, Khalil Dorsey, Stephen Gilmore. And if they end up bringing in anybody else, whether that be another free agent, which I really doubt, or what I do expect to see is someone in the draft, you're starting to, I think, build the talent that you need in your defensive backfield. So that's a quick synopsis of what the Lions have here on defense as we head towards the draft. Let's talk about Hutch. We just talked about on the depth chart piece, he is the motor of your defense. He's going to be the reason for the season for the Lions and the defense in 2024. This guy has been everything that you drafted him to be and more. His true motor never stops. I mean, his work ethic, the things he says, the things he does, the way he presents himself, The numbers, the stats are all showing you that he is a superstar. And one of what I thought was the most important videos of this offseason that we've made is finding help for Hutch. If this man is going to continue his ascension and take the Lions where they want to go, they needed to find someone to pair up on the other side and or get more bolstered help in the middle at defensive tackle. I think the Lions have addressed both of those concerns. We talked about Marcus Davenport on the other side, and we talked about DJ Reader, along with Aleem McNeil, along with the gentleman we mentioned. I think they have increased the talent and the effectiveness of their defensive line. If you look at the stats here, Aiden Hutchinson had 51 combined tackles in 2023. He ended up with 11.5 sacks, but he also had 3 sacks in the playoffs. So it wasn't just a regular season to brag about. He continued that into the 2024 playoffs, and I expect that to continue tenfold into the 2024 season. Now let's talk about the weak side linebacker, Jack Campbell. A guy you took out of Iowa. I think out of all of the rookies you drafted last year, because you had such a quality draft, guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, really as rookies were second level, it sort of put Jack Campbell in the background. And that's sort of sad because I think he had a really good season as a rookie linebacker, stepping into a tough situation in the Lions defense. That's not easy. And I think over the course of the season, Jack Campbell got better and better. And he started to see more and more of the field because I think the Lions coaching staff started to trust him more. I think he is a little bit more athletic than he even looks. And again, ultimately, I think as he continues to learn from guys like Alex Anzalone, get more playing time, if they establish that upfront presence that we just talked about, it ultimately makes Jack Campbell better and hopefully, allows him to contribute even more into next season. I do expect him to continue to play a more prominent role in the defense, and you may see him more and more on the field making plays. I expect him to be a huge part of the Lions defense in 2024 and beyond, and he will be a pillar player for this Lions defense in the organization. And last but certainly not least, Brian Branch. I think this guy is a playmaker that is potentially untapped. I mean, he showed you just a small portion, I think, of what he can be. I think the Lions were still trying to figure out exactly how to use him in a lot of places. He had a little bit of an injury bug, I think, with the ankle that he worked through. Didn't miss a ton of time during last regular season, but was ultimately very, very good. Tackling general. I didn't expect that out of him. The knock out of him coming out of Alabama is he may not be as athletic, as some of the other guys, but I think he disproved that over and over and over again, opening up the season with that pick 6, and then everything just kind of took off from there. Again, I think he's a guy that with what we know about the Cam Sutton departure, knowing they sort of have a need at cornerback, I believe that they now use Brian Branch sort of as that Swiss Army knife in their defensive backfield. He can play slot corner. He could even do an outside corner in a very small sample size, and we know he can play safety, probably both front end and back end. Maybe a little bit more effective in the front end, but a lot of different ways you can use him, and he can be effective for this defense. And I believe him will be a vital piece to why the Lions defense could help them win a Super Bowl in 2024. Now that we've looked at the big picture, can the Lions defense win a Super Bowl in 2024? Let me know what you think in the comment section. Can they win the Super Bowl with their current defense? Let me know. Did the review today shed any light for you? What do you think? I'd really like to know. Now, in my opinion, the way the defense is currently constructed, I don't believe they're there yet. I think they're close. I think Brad Holmes has done an amazing job getting pieces that they needed to help the current defensive situation. DJ Reader, Marcus Davenport. We talked about the Carlton Davis acquisition, as well as Amik Robertson. They've made 4 fantastic moves defensively that help their needs. But I don't think they're done, and I hope they're not done. And I think we're going to see in the draft with Brad Holmes, he's going to pinpoint the defensive lineman they want most. He's going to pinpoint the defensive back they want most. After that, they're going to go best player available for guys they have on their board. But if they're able to do those first 2 things, then at that point, I would be comfortable saying that the Lions defense can win a Super Bowl in 2024. I appreciate you guys coming along for another video. If you liked what we did here today, make sure to hit that like button. The best way to help me out. I cannot say how much I appreciate that. Definitely hit that subscribe button and the notify bell so you don't miss any future videos on Johnny Gaz Sports. We're going to have a full draft preview. We're a few weeks away from the draft in Detroit. That's going to be a lot of fun. We'll definitely do some segments here coming up as we get closer to the April 18th date on the uniform reveal for the Detroit Lions. I'm so excited for that one. So definitely come back and check me out. Thank you guys so much for your time. I hope you have an excellent day.